Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Kageyama, and I'd like to welcome everyone here to Be Your Own Hero. I'm a stage 4 prostate, bone, and lung cancer patient and doing very well. And everybody I know hopefully had a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. And we're going to get going with an absolutely fantastic interview, I believe. And I'm really, really excited about this one. And we'll get into that in a second. Last weekend, I had the honor and the blessing to be able to speak at my church, St. John Baptist de La Salle in Granada Hills. And we'll have some further things about that down the road as soon as we get our act together with the video, which I have not received yet. But I will keep everybody informed as far as what's going on with that. But I'm really happy about this, and I'm really excited to introduce a very, very special person, and her name is Kezhal Dashti. So, Kezhal, would you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are?
Well, you got my name perfectly. I'm Kezhal Dashti. I live in the North Texas area. I'm a stage 1C ovarian cancer survivor, and it's been like this point 9 years since I finished chemotherapy. I own a media company with my husband that we started during the pandemic. We both left our jobs in TV. We were both former news anchors. So we were tired of waking up in the middle of the night to go to work. So we decided to start our own business together. And now we are constant homebodies. The pandemic has made us, we love working from home. And it's a great life. I have 2 dogs. They're my children, my fur children. I tell my parents those are their grandbabies. So, but yeah, that's a little bit of
My daughter, by the way, says the same thing, and I said, no, I am not the grandfather of a dog.
That's what my parents say too. And I'm like, you can't deny the love.
Oh man, that's great. In fact, Kajal lives pretty close to my daughter.
Ew, I had no idea.
Yeah, they're
Small
neighbors,
world.
neighbors in Texas. So
Uh-huh.
that's awesome. So let's get into this because you have a really great story. So let's talk about how your journey with cancer started and what happened exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's like my journey started obviously as a shock. I woke up from surgery and was told I had ovarian cancer, that I had this, germ cell tumor, a rare form of ovarian cancer. And then I just remember the anesthesiologist over my face, like over my head, just telling me, you're going to be okay. This is a very chemosensitive cancer, but don't worry. And I was obviously like in a state of fog, and I was like, it all starts to make sense to me because in my mind, I'm rewinding all these months. And really, my first symptoms, I vividly remember it was like, I didn't get diagnosed until December of 2013. And my symptoms, I know, started around August of that year. I had gone
What kind of symptoms did you have?
like the fatigue. Oh, the fatigue was really the one that was just so intense, but I didn't notice it because I was working morning radio. So I was getting up at like 4 to 4:30 in the morning to go work at a radio station in Dallas while I was also in college. So obviously, like, I was going to bed at like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, waking up early, going to work. So I thought, I was chalking it up to I'm tired, I'm just doing a lot, but it was not normal fatigue. And then the other symptom was this like really hard, like feeling in my abdomen. It was like concrete. But just to preface it, I grew up without health insurance. My dad was an entrepreneur, owned his own business. Having health insurance in this country as a business owner is, yeah, it's not easy. So I would always go to my pediatrician. We would pay cash. So going to the doctor really it wasn't like normal for us. We would just do the basic checkup with a pediatrician and that's it. So I wasn't going and seeing a gynecologist. I didn't really know anything about doing something like that. And I also partially think it's a cultural reason, but I did tell my mom that August, I was like, there's something weird hard in my stomach, like feel this. And I have very dark humor. So I joked around with her and I was like, Mom, I think it's kidney cancer. And she was like, stop, that's not even funny. And now I look back and I'm like, that's dark. Oh my gosh, Kezhal, it's like, you were kind of there, but it was just weird. So we really honestly chalked it up to nothing. I let all these months go by and it gets to the beginning of November and I woke up one morning and like that hard feeling that I had suddenly, like there was something sticking out of my stomach. Like it was like I had a bump and it was really hard, but it was just a small bump on just the right side of my stomach. So I remember like for the first hour I woke up that morning, I was just staring at it in the mirror and I'm like, what is this? This is weird. This was not there the night before. I did not fall. We had a Halloween party, but I was not in any way like drunk. I knew everything that was happening and I was with my closest girlfriends. So I woke up that morning, it freaked me out. So I went to urgent care. And I told my roommates, I'm like, I'm gonna just really quickly go to urgent care. Something doesn't feel right. I'll be back. They didn't think anything of it. Neither did I, honestly. So I go to this urgent care center and the fatigue still is not in my head. To me, that's just, whatever. I'm tired. I'm still tired. Like I would skip class level of tired. It was, to preface how bad the sleep was, I would obviously I would go to bed. Let's say it was a weekend, not even a day where I was going to school or going to work. I'd wake up at like 9 a.m. I'd have a quick bowl of cereal because I would be like starving. And then I'd go back to sleep until like 1 or 2 in the afternoon. And then I'd force myself to stay awake until like 7 or 8 at night. And then I'd go back to sleep. It was a really unreal kind of fatigue. But when I go to the urgent care facility, they have no idea what's going on with me. They do all the like tests that they can do, but I guess they didn't have the right equipment to do a scan or an ultrasound. So they were like, the ER is waiting for you. You need to go to the ER. And obviously at this point I'm panicking because I'm like, what does this mean? I go to the ER and luckily I had health insurance through my university. So it wasn't that big of a deal going for like insurance reasons, but it was just scary because I'm like, okay, wow, this sounds serious. I go there, they're honestly like ready for me. They had a room ready for me. I go back there, they do an abdominal ultrasound and the doctor comes in and he's like, well, you have something called uterine fibroids. These are benign tumors. They can be uncomfortable. You don't have to have them removed. You can have them removed later in life. It's totally up to you, but you just need to follow up with like a gynecologist. So I'm like, okay, interesting. Okay, I have a benign tumor in my body. And I think even that feels weird because you're like, something is there that's not supposed to be there. So I felt weird. I went home to my parents that night because my parents are here in North Texas as well, right by where I went to school. And I'm happy I went home that night because the next morning I had a kidney stone. It was a really bad weekend for me. I had a 6 millimeter kidney stone that I couldn't pass. It was my first kidney stone. So I also had to get surgery to have that removed. But of course, like to see a kidney stone, you have to have a CT scan done. So I have the CT scan performed on me and months later or like a month and a half later after my surgery, I find out that the CT scan read that I had a malignant tumor, but nobody had told me about it. I walked out of the hospital without ever knowing I had cancer, just that I had a 6 millimeter kidney stone that needed to be removed. So I was like, okay, which was a very big shock to find out. So we had to go, this kidney stone was so massive and it was so painful. We could not concentrate on this benign tumor that we thought I had. So I had my urologist appointment lined up and my gynecologist appointment in the same day. Like I had to miss a week of school, a week of work, all because like I couldn't drive. I was hopped up on hydrocodone because the pain was just constantly coming back. But we go to this urologist.
Was the pain from the kidney stone more or the tumor?
Yes, my tumor, I've met many people with ovarian cancer who say like their tumor was uncomfortable or caused pain, but I will say all those months I had it because it was there, I never had any pain. the biggest things really for me was the fatigue. The fatigue was just, and obviously then the physical aspect of like this tumor growing. But it was just like in a month, not even a month, because when I finally went and saw the gynecologist that could do this laparoscopic procedure, because I really wanted to get back to work and get back to just my life. I didn't want a big surgery that was going to, leave me in bed for 3 weeks. I am a workaholic. I love to work. It's my passion. I enjoy it. It's like an outlet for me. And I'm in like a very creative field. So I just like to constantly be doing something. So to sit in bed all day, it's just not fun for me. And I loved my job and I loved working at this radio station that I really did see a future in for a long time. But I saw this laparoscopic procedure. I go to this doctor. I happened to, he was ready to do the surgery. He said I didn't have to do it just like every other doctor, but he had all my scans and everything because somehow all the hospital systems are like connected. So it made it really easy in some ways too. So we go to this doctor, we go to schedule the surgery, and I got so lucky because this was all right before Christmas. And his last surgery for that month was December 13th. And that was a surgery happened to pop up because somebody canceled theirs that day. So we were like, we'll take the surgery, because I was like, this is perfect. It's right when my semester's ending. It's, right before the next semester, I can rest up. I'll be good to go when school starts, and I could take a couple more weeks off work. They'll be okay with it. But obviously that's not how things turned out. But in that span, like, I made that appointment like mid-November, and by the next month, my tumor went from the size of what they thought was like a baby's head to I could not even see my feet. So it was massive.
Wow.
Yeah, it was so big. And I remember I would point that out. It was like right at the end, it suddenly just grew really fast, because now when I look back at it, I'm like, I know I had something since August, but it must just not have grown as rapidly as it did in that last couple months that I know I had this tumor. But I even right before my pre-op surgery, I told the doctor, I was like, this doesn't look right. Like, I cannot see my feet anymore. I was able to see my feet 3 weeks ago, sir. And he was like, no, that's not possible. Fibroids don't grow that fast. And of course, this is something I've noticed happens a lot with people my age, or at my age. I'm 30 now. I'm not 21. But when I was 21, it was something I hear from other people who also were diagnosed young is, you bring up these crazy symptoms, you're explaining like, hey, like something's out of whack, something's not normal. And the first, answer some of these doctors go to is, it's nothing. You're young, you're healthy. Well, I think I proved otherwise, obviously, like a week later, but I think back to that and I'm like, man, what would have happened if it was caught even in that ER? What would have happened? But obviously you can't change anything. But yeah,
Let me pause you right
yes.
there, because you brought up something that I think is very important for people to hear, is how important is it to listen to your body?
Yes. Oh, it's so important. I wish I listened to my body sooner. I think back, I'm like, why didn't I go to a doctor in August? Having something that feels like it was like concrete hard. Why didn't I think to go to the doctor? What made me think that that was normal? Like, I think even to myself, but then I'm also, when this tumor is growing, why was no one listening to me? I think it was just a lot of things at once. And it was just so, at the end, it's just so fast. In a matter of a few weeks, I found out suddenly I had ovarian cancer. That was the last thing I was thinking going into surgery. And what was funny, it was right before surgery, I kept showing a false positive pregnancy test. And these nurses were not letting up on it. They were like, ma'am, are you pregnant? Are you not telling us? And I'm like, I think at this point, I would much rather there was a baby at the other end of this. I don't know. Sounds a lot better and happier than this, or maybe, I don't know. I didn't have a boyfriend or anything. So, but I didn't. I mean, I was like, no, that's not even possible. there's no way. They sent my parents out of the room because they thought I was lying. I was like, no, I swear I'm not. They were like, we just don't want to go in there and find a baby. And I'm like, well, then do an ultrasound. I'm like, I'm not pregnant. Take this tumor out. So anyway, surgery happens. I learned later the surgery took longer because obviously they go in, they learn it's not what it is. The tumor ends up rupturing, and I come out of surgery. I know a few hours later than I was.
The tumor ruptured during the surgery?
Yes, because they didn't, when I read the post-op report, it had said that they went in like laparoscopically because that's the original surgery we're going to do. And they noticed it was something not like a fibroid. And when they went to mess with it, it collapsed. It just started disintegrating. So then it was just in my abdomen, or it just was falling apart. So yeah, that was really crazy to learn about. But that obviously bumped me up from what I would have been. I would have been a stage 1A because somehow it all stayed just on my right ovary and fallopian tube. But instead it got bumped up to a stage 1C because of the rupture. And I learned weeks later when I finally saw an oncologist that I had to have chemo because of it. So something I was a little frustrated with was if it stayed stage 1A, I wouldn't have had to have chemo because it would have already been, I mean, and this is where I don't know. Part of me is like, the chemo was the smart decision because now I know my chances of it ever recurring is less than 1%. That's a really good odd. But if I didn't, my chances of recurrence would have been greater, even at stage 1A. So like I go back to myself and I'm just like, you know what? Everything happened because it was supposed to. You were supposed to have chemo. It all happened the way it happened because you were meant to go on this journey. There was a reason you were meant to go on this journey. So just now I look back and I'm like, you know what? It happened for a reason. I feel like I've learned so much from it all, but it was,
isn't that the truth?
yeah. Crazy way to find out though. I still just think, I'm like, I just remember, but I do remember when I woke up and they told me I did want to be brave because I did think a lot about what are my parents thinking? Oh my goodness, those two are in the waiting room. And I know my parents, they're both like, I love them. They're helicopter parents. And I grew up like under their roof. Like they were all over. I mean, my dad worked from home. He was an entrepreneur. So he was always home. My mom was always home. So it's just, we were always around each other and I know everything about them. So I knew when they found out, I was like, I know this is going to be hard for them. I know they're not going to take this well. So I put on a brave face and honestly, they were really strong for me. They did not cry. And I remember later on my parents telling me that my mom was really emotional and so was my dad. My dad was like, we cannot cry in front of her. We have to be strong for her. Like she has to know that we're not scared. So that was really nice because it did make it easier for me to digest the information. It was hard, but I don't think, and I will say, I don't think it hit me until I went to my first oncology appointment. It was so easy to be brave in that moment. But I feel like the real vulnerability didn't actually start until I set foot into that oncology office and I'm like, okay, this is real now. This is actually happening. Like I actually have cancer.
So when you found that out,
Mm-hmm.
what were your immediate thoughts?
I thought I had to do chemo. I mean, I remember before they even told me, oh, if you didn't have to have, I remember my surgeon was even saying I didn't have to have chemo. He was telling me from the way he thought that I was cancer free and that I could, just go on in life, just having regular checkups with an oncologist. So I was pretty calm. I was not really afraid. I was just, it's happening. But I am that kind of person. I was a journalism major. I went and I read about the cancer. As soon as my doctor told me the name of the cancer, I was on my phone on the internet. I was reading all about it. I was reading all the studies about what my cancer was. It was called ovarian dysgerminoma. I went and read every study about it. I went and read all the tests that were done, how many people survived, how many people didn't. I wanted to know everything. I wanted to know the exact chemo regimen that was given. So I knew everything before I honestly went and even met my oncologist.
You're bringing up a great a great point that I always like to talk about.
Uh-huh.
So many, we all go to school for a career, yours is in journalism, you know, people study to become doctors and lawyers and accountants, and they go to school to study whatever it is that they want to be. They become what they're going to be as a result of all this knowledge that they built up. But here comes cancer.
Mhm.
And how many people, you know, they're basing they're being confronted with a life-threatening situation that they don't know anything about.
Yeah.
And you're one of the rare ones that, put your nose the grindstone, wanted to learn everything about it. And so many people just say, hey, doc, whatever you say. And they
I
give all the power to their doctor.
Yes, that is something that shocks me. I have met several people who I will say, oh, so what kind of like whatever cancer they have? I'm like, what kind did you have? They don't know. And
Wow.
that's something that will shock me all the time. And I'm like, really? Like, I know every minute detail about the cancer I have, like, or I had. And it's just, I think and I chalk it up to maybe some people are too scared to look it up. I mean, I was scared, but I just felt like if I know more, I don't want to be the person who doesn't know everything going in, because look what happened already to me. Like, I feel like I kind of let the doctors do what they thought was best, and I let them just determine everything. And I ended up finding out I didn't have fibroids. So it was, I had to read. I had to read about it. I had to know everything about it.
So, as a result of reading about it, what kind of confidence did that give you about what was going on?
Oh, I had such good confidence about it. That's the thing. That was what was wild. Because I saw how good the outcome was. The dermatoma is chemosensitive. So as soon as you start chemo, it essentially does start working and killing the cancer. That is something I'm, knock on wood, I'm so lucky with, and I'm so happy. I was fortunate enough to have a form of cancer that was that sensitive to chemo. But I really had the attitude. I was like, I'm gonna do this. I'm so ready for it. But I didn't realize how hard it was gonna be. I really was like, oh, this will be, maybe I'll lose my hair. And I have heard stories of people who didn't lose their hair, but it can't be that bad, right? And then the first week, I just will never forget that first week. I didn't realize it was every day, and it was 8 hours a day, and that my veins would be popping, and that I was going to get bloated, and I was only going to look and feel like a shell of myself. So I think that's why I say I really was, to excuse my language, chemo bitch, because I did not expect how difficult it was going to be. And every time I say this to my doctors and nurses, they're like, Kezhal, I don't think you realize how hard the chemo was. You can't, because I always say I was such a horrible person. And they're like, no, it was hard. That was an everyday chemo that I was getting for 2 months straight. It was
Every
exhausting.
every day for 2 months?
5 days. So my regimen was 5 days straight of like the 3 different drugs I was given. And then every week I had to go in 1 day a week to get one of them, which made me feel horrible and would put me in the hospital, because for the first 2 rounds of my chemo, we didn't realize that it was called bleomycin. When I was receiving bleomycin, it was having a really bad negative effect on my Neupogen shots to raise my white blood cells. It was making me get 102, 103-degree fevers. And the second you get a fever, you have to go to the ER. So then I was in the ER for 72 hours, because they have to make sure I don't have an infection. They're running all these tests. So it felt like I was in a hospital all the time. It was exhausting. You don't get any sleep in a hospital. Every 4 hours they're walking in, they're just, check your vitals. And I'm like, it's on a screen. Like, and then I got crankier because I had no sleep. And then I'm just like, listen, I just want to leave. I want to go home. You can tell me my results when I get home. I'll come back if it's so bad. I want to be in my bed. I want my dog. I don't want to be I don't want to be poked and prodded. And it's just, chemo is rough. It's horrible, and I wouldn't wish it on anybody. It's really one of the most awful things that exist. And yeah, it was,
I'm right. I'm right there
I know,
with you.
I know you understand. It's just,
Yes, I absolutely do. In fact, I was in the hospital for a week, and at 12 o'clock every night, I would have to get a chest x-ray. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, they would do a blood test every day.
yep.
And so one night, the x-ray tech comes in, and what they would do is they'd stick the screen behind me
Uh-huh.
on my back in
Uh-huh.
order to take the x-ray.
Right.
And one night he came in and I was like out of it. I was half asleep and just not with it. And
Yeah.
and he took this like rectangular screen thing and just shoved it, and it caught my skin and my back, and I
Oh.
and I just screamed, and I'm like, what is wrong with you? And he's apologizing, and he ended up coming back like a couple nights later, and he was much more gentle about it. But some of these people, they're just going through the motions, and when you're
Yes.
dealing with somebody who's like asleep.
Oh, you just reminded me of a story that happened when I was also in the hospital. It was one of those 72-hour stays I had to do. The nurse comes in to give me a Benadryl, but it was through an IV. She pumped it through the IV so fast, I stopped breathing. And I didn't know that was possible, but I was having like this, it was almost like I was having an allergic reaction to the Benadryl, which was crazy. But I just remember I was eating ice cream because I was so desperate to just, I was on steroids too for nausea, and I was hungry and I needed something. So my mom was giving me ice cream and I just stopped breathing and I just started
Ooh,
vomiting because I'm like trying to catch breath. And it was almost like my lungs just, it was really weird. And then she was like, I'm so sorry. And we couldn't, my oncologist comes in, she was like, she pushed your Benadryl too fast through the IV. And I was like, that was the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced.
wow.
But you're
That,
right. They just go through the motions. For them, it's a job. And I'm sure it affects them in some way too, being around us, the patients, in a way. But it's in some way, you're almost like, do you also not see the pain that we're constantly going through? This doesn't stop for us.
right.
You get to go home, you get a good 8 hours sleep at night, and you wake up and yeah, it's a routine for you. But for me, like this is life or death, and I don't know what's going to happen on the other end right now. So it's just, uh, yeah.
That's a great point. And people, what really gets me is people don't look at it as a life or death situation a lot of times.
Mhm.
They're just looking at this moment right here,
That's right.
instead of looking at it as, hey, we need to take steps to, you know, so that I could live, you know,
Exactly. Exactly.
and start looking ahead. And so many people, look at their situation, and it's all woe is me, and why me and everything like that. And I know you didn't do that. You were focused on getting better, and doing what it takes so that you could, you know, so that you could live.
And I will say, I didn't, at the beginning, I did have the woe is me attitude. I absolutely did. I was that person I was really upset. I was so mad at the world, and I just couldn't understand why this was happening. But I remember it was towards like my last round that I was just like, you know what? You're almost there. You had this for a reason. Use whatever platform it is that you will have. You're wanting to become a journalist. Okay, great. Try to do something to bring some focus and attention to ovarian cancer, or to the fact that you're a young adult who got cancer and that Early detection is important because right now we just don't have a cure to cancer. So the most important thing that you could teach someone, like, is go get checked, because if you catch it just early enough, you may be lucky enough to not have to go through chemo. I mean, I hear so many stories of people who caught it early. I mean, I always say Tim's co-host is the perfect example. She caught her breast cancer early enough and didn't have to have chemotherapy. It's just, I would much rather not have chemotherapy. So that's why I tell people, I'm like, you don't want chemo. Trust me. Go to the doctor appointment. And if that doctor doesn't listen, go get the second opinion. And if the second opinion doesn't work, go get a third opinion until someone addresses the problem you find or you have.
But that's all about aligning with yourself, with the doctor who is right for you.
Yes. Yes.
Because if you have a doctor that doesn't align with what you want, then get another doctor.
Right.
I mean, this is your life that we're talking about. And it's not like going to the shoe store and buying a pair of shoes and saying, well, that one's good enough. That's
Oh yeah.
yeah,
No, it's not. To me, you interview the doctor. It's an interview. You go in, to me, bedside manner is important. That's a big one. If I went to two doctors, I remember two oncologists right before I finally made my decision. The first one was really cold. And I mean, he probably was a really good doctor, but in my mind, I'm like, if I'm going to go through this, I want someone who's going to hold my hand and make me feel comfortable. And luckily, the next doctor I go to, she just had this like motherliness to her that I loved, and she listened, and she was so thorough and cared, and it was just so, I felt safe, and I feel like that matters. So I'm when I tell people, when you go to find a doctor, think of it, you're interviewing someone. They need to be the right person to help take care of you.
How important, and this is something that's really, really important to me, how important is hope
Oh man,
as a cancer patient?
so important. Because I will say, at the beginning, I didn't have hope. I was very depressed. I mean, my mom was calling friends and asking for them to come help me because I really was hopeless. And it made it a really difficult treatment. So there was a moment we thought my treatment wasn't working, and they didn't tell me at this point because I was in such a fragile mental state that once I got to like that last round, I saw that like light at the end of the tunnel, I saw hope, and it made it. And honestly, once I changed my attitude on it, and it really, that's what it was. And I've talked to Christine Handy about this. I know you also spoke to her about this. It's almost like you have to force your mind or train your mind in a way to look at things differently. And when I did do that, it made it a lot easier. It really did. Like I was able to just go put my head down, get the treatment. I knew I was going to feel sick, but I was like, you know what? You're only going to feel sick for a week. That's it. The nausea, it's horrible, but it's 1 week. At the end of that week, you're going to be fine. In 2 weeks from now, I started to play almost like a game with myself at the end. I was like, in 3 weeks, you'll probably have hair growing back, and in 4 weeks, you're going to move back home to your college house with your roommates. So it's almost like I had to get myself excited for things like in the future. So it was always like, I was trying to think ahead and be like, all right, look, there's something good coming. Just focus on that and not focus on so much of the pain and that discomfort.
Man, we talked about this before we started here. We could talk for literally days, but why don't we do this? Why don't you give our audience your final thought, and then we're going to bring you back at
Yes.
least another time, maybe two, who knows.
Yes, a part 2.
At least there may be part 3. So
Yeah.
let's see how that goes. But what are your final thoughts that you want to leave with people just on what we spoke about?
Oh man, for me, the biggest message I will always push to anyone, especially younger individuals, because young people do not go to the doctor enough. And I know this because I have friends who don't go to the doctor enough, that I'm like, no, you need to go get your checkup. It's time to go get the checkup done. Or, it's just, your health is so important. There is nothing more important than your health. Money doesn't come first. Even family doesn't come first. Your health comes first, because if your health's not good, nothing is going to go, the way you want it to. So I'm a big advocate for early detection, because right now we do not have a cure for cancer. The cure for cancer is getting it caught early, so that you don't have to go through chemo, or that you're lucky enough then to just have to follow up with blood work. I mean, your health is just so important. Get those yearly checkups. If something is wrong, get a second opinion, get a third opinion, get a fourth opinion if you have to, until someone listens to the weird symptom you're having, because you know your body better than anyone else. We all do. I know my body very well. And if something's off, my doctor won't know that, because she doesn't live with me. He or she is not following me around all day. They don't see what my habits are, my sleep habits. So if like you're sleeping too much and you feel like that's not normal, go to the doctor. I just think it's not silly. Even if you feel it's silly and you come out and you heard it's nothing at all, great. It's better to hear it's nothing than have to hear later on that it was something more serious. So that's my message to everybody.
That is fantastic. Absolutely great. Great advice. And people of all ages
Yes, all ages.
should take your advice. So thank you so much, Kezhal. I love what we discussed, and we're going to discuss more on part 2.
Yes.
And talk about more about what you're doing, and some of the things you're involved with cancer and things of that nature. But thank you so much. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
So what I'm going to do is I always end up sharing a couple of positive quotes with people, and this is from Dr. Norman Vincent Peale. And the first one is, let the challenge of your ambitions, of your inspirations, rouse your slumbering and often unused powers into action. And then the second quote is, problems are to the mind what exercise is to the muscles. They toughen and make you strong. And so I'd like to thank everybody for joining us here at To Be Your Own Hero, and make the most, absolute most of every single day, every single hour, every single minute, and every single breath. As Kezhal said, your health is everything. So take care of yourself, and we will see you next week on To Be Your Own Hero. Thank you so much for joining us, and please subscribe to the channel. And we'll see you next week. Have a fantastic week. Thank you very much.